But ultimately, the business model comes down to we can do it very quickly for you, we can do it at high quality, and we can do it at low cost. And I think we all know that those three things don't really fit. And as a result, generally speaking, agencies are underpaid by their clients.
Hey Nick, thank you for accepting the invite and welcome to A Glass of Marketing with Joe. The concept is pretty simple. I usually drink some wine and we talk about marketing, of course, personal and professional growth. So for people that don't know you, you're actually the co-founder of Manning Gottlieb, which is one of probably the best media agencies in the world that then was sold to Omnicom. But for the people that don't know you, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, hello. Thanks for inviting me to do this, Joe. And I'll keep the introduction short because I've been in the industry now for over 40 years, and I don't want to read out my CV for you. But I guess it's divided into two phases. I spent 27 years in media agencies, mostly with Manning Gottlieb, our agency that we founded and then ultimately sold. I stayed within Omnicom for a while as Chief Executive Officer for the UK for the OMD Group. And then I spent the last 17 years doing media consulting on an independent basis. I spent 10 years at Ubiquity, helping establish the worldwide network for that business. I spent a year at MediaLink, and I now work as an independent consultant, commentator, author, non-executive director, and so I'm now sort of, if you like, I now consider myself to be somebody who can look at the whole of the industry from and almost like a historic perspective, but also track what's happening now and into the future based on my time in the industry.
My first question was, you actually seen the industry evolving, right, since the beginnings. From traditional marketing to digital marketing as well. What's your take on that? What do you think about the evolution of marketing of the last 30, 40 years?
Well, it's enormously powerful and extremely good news for brands that they now have so many levers that they can pull in terms of how they market their brands and products. I tend to think of it in terms of three periods. There was the analog period that we all know about, and the industry was very different then, but you had very limited choice for advertisers, but it was very controlled, sometimes regulated. The second phase, I would say, last 20 years was what I call advertising 2.0, when digital marketing really exploded. We had the proliferation of devices and channels and search and social and influencer and so on and so forth. Fantastic growth there. And I think we're on the cusp of what I describe as advertising 3.0, which brings in elements of retail media, brings in digital commerce, and really changes the way that advertisers, marketers can now go to market. And particularly in relation to retail media, digital commerce, in terms of closed loop systems that improve the ability to develop customer relationships, to measure, to use different channels to reach people. So the toolkit is now fantastic and has never been better and never greater. But that comes at a price.
Yeah, no, and we're going to touch the price in a second. But I mean, I feel like probably the biggest power of digital marketing today is that you can actually measure. You can measure everything, and probably measuring the wrong things, it's even worse, right? But how much you think we can measure, and what's your take of measurement between the past and the present?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm a big fan of measurement. I wouldn't describe myself as an expert on it. It's a very specific and very specialized discipline, but I believe that you should measure as much as you possibly can. But the obvious thing to say about that is that it needs to be good measurement, it needs to be accurate, it needs to be robust, and it needs to provide results that you can actually use. And so going back to the analog era, we had very good measurement. It was agreed amongst all parties via what were known as joint industry committees. The research was strong. There were robust sample sizes, and you could pretty much take to bank the results of that. With digital media and digital channels, it's changed a lot. There is now obviously too much data. It's vast. A lot of it may or may not be good. It's difficult to tell sometimes. A lot of it is the bits don't fit together. There is lack of interoperability, as they say, and sometimes you have to rely on the say-so of the platform. So it's very difficult to know exactly what's going on in Meta's properties, because they give you the results on Facebook and Instagram. Ditto for Google, and we kind of and obviously there are separate systems for TikTok and Amazon and everything else. So we're inundated with lots of different ways of going to market, but we haven't got a data system that is well regulated, and we have to rely too much on the providers of the platforms. There are no standards throughout all of that. So it's a pretty Wild West situation out there without the kind of guardrails that we used to have. Now that's fine because it kind of has to be like that, because it's impossible to put a kind of a fence around all of that. In some ways we wouldn't want to do that. But what we have ended up though is with all this gigantic amounts of data is an excessive reliance upon the people who are reporting it back to us, lack of systems, and obviously excessive supply. And in the end, what I care about, and I think what most advertisers should think about, is, did it work? So the ultimate measurement for me is all about the business results. Did we achieve what we intended to achieve? And that can be acquiring new customers. It can be changing people's behavior. It can be brand equity. It can be anything you want it to be. And it can be multiple parts of that. So performance advertisers want to acquire customers, and then they start the virtuous circle of being able to interact with those customers via email marketing and other forms of marketing. Brand advertisers, especially if they're going through an intermediary like a retailer, want to sell more through those retailers and online. So you need to have a strategy that allows you to do both. And some people want a hybrid of all of that. So, quite a lot of the new channels we've got, like retail media and digital commerce, are absolutely relevant to all advertisers, including the CPG guys. So we have lots of things to measure, and we don't have very good systems for measuring them.
Yeah, and it gets back to the definition of success. So, of course, you need to know how to define success in media, right? But I usually say my job as a media specialist is translate the business objective in media. So probably, first of all, you need to have the business objective clear. Then you need to be able to translate it in media effectively. But then you need to measure success as well. So defining the right KPIs and using the right tools. But getting back to planning, right? In my opinion, and I mean, I started like almost 10 years ago, so I would say I started doing performance marketing, right? I started doing Google ads, Meta ads, so I'm part of the new generation, right? But how I see it from the outside is that I feel like in the past, media planning was like more focused on psychology, trying to understand people and try to tell a story. Where today, I feel like it's too much focus on performance, and I say it from a performance marketing point of view. I feel like it's focused too much on measuring, on the CPC, on the CTR, on the CPA, which is great because I mean, bottom of funnel. I think it's great. You're giving power to the CMOs. We're talking about return on investment. In an ideal world, I can have unlimited budget until the return on investment is covering all the costs, right? So it's power, it's fun, it's cool. But like, do you think media planning today is less fun than yesterday?
It's very different. The need for it is even greater than before because with an enormous number of channels available to you, you've got to make decisions about how to use those channels. And I mean, there's everything from big television over here to search ads to TikTok to sort of short form video on YouTube, etc. So to have somebody looking at all of those options and making the right choices is critical. So media planning is even more important now than ever before. But there is less of it going on. And If you go back to your point about bottom of the funnel, ROI, CPAs, and so on, the best way to achieve that is to actually get people to take action, and with a call to action. And the best way to achieve that is to show them something, or get them to listen to something, ideally both at the same time, that motivates them, that meets their needs, that taps into their mindset, their life stage, whatever. So the psychology that you describe is part of it, but the art and craft of this is to actually craft messages that tap into what your audience needs and wants at that particular moment, and that varies, of course, between fast-moving consumer goods and things that are only bought annually, like car insurance and so on and so forth. So understanding your audience, understanding the triggers that make them behave in a certain way, understanding how you change their attitudes, understanding their preferences, all of that needs to, or should be, pre-planned, as opposed to just throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and hoping some of it sticks, which is what I think a lot of goes on these days. So, in digital media in particular, I don't think the crafts of doing that have translated terribly well into it. And I mean, I could quote all sorts of examples of how that is, but we have a situation now where people say things along the lines of, if you don't capture the attention of somebody in the first second or two of a TikTok video, then you've lost. Well, capturing the attention of somebody and showing them a message that's going to motivate them and change their behavior or whatever within the space of 2 seconds is pretty darn hard. And trying to write a creative brief that does that is pretty hard too. So you have to work within the attention economy that we've got and find ways of cutting through to people in a way that's meaningful to them, that they're going to respond to, but also that they're going to spend time with. We don't want to bombard people and beat them over the head with far too much messaging that isn't relevant to them.
Yeah,
so,
but don't.
Go on.
But don't you think the solution then is just storytelling? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to bomb people with a lot of messaging. But at the end of the day, people get bombed anyway, because this is the way they consume content today. If you look at the new generation, they scroll and scroll and scroll on TikTok. So they're bombing their self anyway, right? I feel...
With lots of content on TikTok, as well as the ads on TikTok, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm saying as an advertiser, I need to be part of the media consumption. The way people consume media today, it's actually like TikTok is doing right now. I'm not saying it is right. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just an observation, right? This is how people consume content. If you compare it with, I don't know, like 40 years ago, you had like 6 TV channels, and this is everything you had. So you could, of course, move from one channel to another, but this is it. Where today, because of, if you look at content creators, and content creators might be the metaphor of television channels. If in the past you had 6 television channels, today you have 6 million television channels, and people continuously move from one channel to another. Us as adults, unfortunately, we need to be there and bomb them as well. I mean, probably the real challenge is, how can you make people remember you in this sea of information? And in my opinion, the only way is storytelling, making a cool story, telling a nice story as well. What's your take on that?
Well, absolutely recognize the issue that you're talking about, Gio. And I think of it in a very simple terms, really, where there are good places to reach people through advertising and less good places to reach people. You need to clearly gain their attention, and attention has become one of the key metrics in advertising now, although it's underutilized at the moment. Perhaps we can come back to that. But it's not just about attention, it's also about retention. So you need to tell them something they're going to remember, act upon, that's going to get into their brains and make them do things. Trying to do that when they're scrolling, trying to do that when they're trying to get to the next bit of content, whether it's the latest video or whatever, is very difficult. And it's arguable that brands shouldn't try to do that. And let's just be really clear, is media consumption has changed enormously, but not everybody is on TikTok all the time.
Yeah.
Not everybody has abandoned television. Not everybody has abandoned radio. Not everybody has abandoned print. And then we start to get into other forms of communication, like YouTube videos and so on. So the palette, the menu is fantastic, but you have to figure out where are the right places to get those messages across. Your point about storytelling is right, except of course we have to tell stories in a different way now. We have less time to do that. But with less time, it means that we have to be more able to gain their attention and thus retention later on. So the art of media planning has never been greater than ever before, and the art of crafting creative messages that operate within the environment that you've described is also more important now than ever before. So the roles that agencies can play in all of this, the creative people, the media planners, the people who execute, is critically important. And I think we live in a world now where some of that is no longer recognized as being as important as it used to be. We have a lot of advertisers now doing it themselves through the consoles that you can use for Facebook, etc. You have a vast long tail of advertisers who don't need agencies because they're doing it themselves, because they're not, what they're looking for is different.
Don't you think those platforms are trying to kill the agencies? Because if you think about it, right? Google, Meta, of course they need a driver, right? So they need the gasoline, which is the client that is putting the money, right? And they need the driver, which usually is the agency driving the platform, right? But they're making the platform much easier. And I'm telling you from a point of view of someone that has been activating campaigns for the last 10 years. And I can guarantee you that Google, Meta, every platform, 10 years ago, they needed more manual work than today. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, how I see it is, of course, today you have two ways to create a campaign. You can use the manual way. So of course, you still need someone who is an expert. They need to build the strategy. They need to do for example, on Google, the keyword research. So you need to put a little bit of more planning in there. On the other side, you can simply give the final URL, the website to Google, and then it is gonna create it itself. It's clearly less efficient. When you go to the auto creation, is less efficient. But if you put it on the table and you sum the money you're giving to the agency and the inefficiency created by the auto, it's better to go in some ways, if you are a small client, it's better to go with the auto creation of the campaign. So don't use the agency. Then not go through the agency. So what do you think? Do you think that those platforms are trying to kill the agency?
Everything you said is, again, I recognize. I don't think they're trying to kill the agencies. I think they're trying to do what's right for them. And in the process, as a byproduct of that, they may well end up harming and ultimately potentially killing the agencies in years to come. If I was a small advertiser, particularly if I was sort of small to medium business, and my objectives were as simple as you've described, I would do exactly what they do. I would use the new tools. I'd use AI. I'd use Performance Max. I'd do the things that you're talking about, and I would do it myself. I don't need an agency to do that. But that's because I might have very simple needs. I might have very simple creative requirements, and I know the audience that I want, and I would trust the platforms to deliver that audience to me. Whether they do that well or not is another matter, and I wouldn't take that for granted. Other brands, whether we can talk about the kind of sectors we're talking about here, automotive, fast-moving consumer goods, financial services, you name it, need the kind of creativity in both content and channel selection and execution that agencies can bring. So we really are now operating in a two-speed or two-channel world. We've got advertising, as we knew it, in terms of the kind of brands, and they're not always brands, by the way. Sometimes they're services, sometimes they're people like governments who want to change people's attitudes. So they need the kind of advertising that gets you the attention you want and the retention you want, and they need to spend time telling those stories that you're talking about. The second side of the advertising industry doesn't need that. What it needs is to distribute a lot of assets very quickly in a viral kind of way. Doesn't need big creative messaging, and it can tap into social, into search, into CRM, into email, into all those channels that deliver the right kind of customers, and then they can develop the the closed loop that gives you. So, it depends on what the advertiser wants to achieve. So what Ford need in terms of advertising cars is completely different to what a small business that is trying to acquire customers cost effectively needs. The advertising industry has grown to $1 trillion now. It's nearly doubled in the last 5 years. It's because so many other classes of advertiser have come along and are now doing what you describe. And all the growth, or most of the growth, is coming through those channels, like the digital channels. You see the growth of Meta, you see the growth of Amazon, you see the growth of TikTok, and the retail media networks are now going gangbusters. Walmart are making vast amounts of money this way. Amazon are, and so are advertisers, other companies who've got large first-party databases that they can tap into. So when we talk about the advertising industry, we have to talk about it in a very, very different way now. And the art for agencies is to figure out what kind of advertiser this is and the best way to go about doing that. None of it's mutually exclusive. What's right for one company may not be right for another, but you've got the whole menu to play with, and it's a question of figuring out where within that menu you achieve the right combination.
But don't you think on the other side, those platforms also democratize the advertising world? Because, as I see it, I feel like agencies make money out of the knowledge gap between, the client and the agency as well. Because you might tell your client, look, to activate this campaign, to build this plan, it takes, 1 month. It takes for you, 2 days, and the client doesn't know what you're actually doing, and then you just monetize that. Where today, because those platforms are kind of easier to use, or at least you also have a self-service platform, you actually able, if you are like a medium to small business, let's say you are a pizza chain in London, right? Instead of paying an agency thousands of euro every month, you can actually do it yourself. Less efficiency, less effectiveness, but you save money, right?
Well, why do we assume it's less efficient and less effective? It might be more efficient and more effective. And if I'm running a chain of pizza restaurants in London, that's exactly what I would do. I don't need an agency to help me do that. If I just want to sell pizzas through my restaurants, then why would you not use the self-service platforms that are available to you? You don't need an agency to craft, big messaging and spend millions of dollars. You just don't need to do that. But obviously, the bigger brands who have got different needs still need the agencies to do what they've always done. But the range of choice is much greater now. So, when you're talking to, let's take Ford as an example, and you want to, showcase the cars in the best possible way, you want to have great creative, and you want big brand messaging and so on and so forth. But equally, you've got a whole dealership network to think about as well. So, in terms of top of funnel, bottom of funnel, you need tactics throughout. So it's very different now. And I think that basically marketing has become much more interesting, much more, in many ways, much more complex, yes. But the ability to get it right now is great, as long as you've got the right people. And I'm talking about client people and non-client people here. As long as you've got the right people who know how to do this, it's great. And sometimes, if you're a pizza restaurant in London, you don't need any of that at all. So it's all down to the objectives of the advertiser.
On the other side, what do you think about the relationship between client and agencies? Because I feel like today's clients want to always pay less because it's a very competitive market, where on the other side, agencies need to cut costs, but at the same time guarantee higher quality, which is impossible, right? I see the agency model, I don't know, with a very low margins as well. What's your take on that?
Well, we have, I think it's fair to say, probably one of the most dysfunctional markets ever known in the advertising industry now, because we've got a huge concentration in, if we talk about 80%-ish of the market, outside of the self-service side of it, 80% of the rest of the industry goes through only 6 major companies, the 6 holding companies. So there isn't a huge amount of choice if you're an advertiser who wants the kind of services they offer and you want it internationally. You want consistency of messaging throughout your territories. But you also want the nuances between markets. You want all of the skills that you need to be a proper, a creative company or a media company. And so what happens is that the 6 companies in question are insanely competitive with each other. They compete, very, very aggressively against each other. They do some fantastically wonderful things to do that. But ultimately, the business model comes down to we can do it very quickly for you, we can do it at high quality, and we can do it at low cost. And I think we all know that those 3 things don't really fit. And as a result, generally speaking, agencies are underpaid by their clients, but they can't charge more because of the competitiveness of the industry. They're all trying to undercut each other the whole time and offer too much for too little. There's lack of competition, so clients can't say, well, that's not good enough, I need to go to somebody else. They can do it on a national basis, but not internationally, really. And so we're in this kind of death spiral where agencies are having to work harder for less money. They're having to work their people harder. The rates of salary and terms and benefits are not increasing commensurately because there's not enough money to go around. The holding companies need to achieve certain targets in terms of their reporting to their shareholders. They're having to resort to making money in ways which are not necessarily good for the industry. In fact, they're positively bad for the industry. And their people are suffering because they're having to work harder under greater pressure. The clients are putting more pressure on them. And it's quite fashionable to blame clients for this and say, they've put the advertisers have put the agencies under too much pressure. But it's a seller's and a buyer's market. I mean, you've got, if a client goes to you as an agency, Gio, and says, right, these are all the things I want, rather than saying, yeah, but we can't do all of that unless we charge you this, you offer them, you give them everything they want. You want fast, you got fast. You want it good, and if you want it cheap, you got it cheap. And that's, I'm exaggerating for effect, and I don't want to denigrate the work that agencies do because, if you cut me open, I'm still an agency guy. But I just try to look at the industry as it is, rather than as people would like it to be, or sometimes pretend that it is.
What's the solution?
Well, the solution in the end is that I wish I knew exactly how this is going to happen, but it has to be, in the end, that agencies will have to start, they need a different business model whereby what they do and the value that they add is paid for properly, as opposed to the situation at the moment where it isn't. Now, if you sort of say to me, yeah, great, wave your magic wand and make that happen, the answer is you can't. And I generally believe the only way it's ever going to happen is if the market becomes much more competitive, or rather, much more, if there was a lot more choice out in the marketplace, I think that would happen. I think there's going to have to be a reset. I generally believe that the holding companies are going to find it harder and harder to survive in this scenario because they're having to, prop up their revenues in ways. I mean, if you look at the growth of the holding companies last year, roughly 2.3% growth across the piece, across the 6 companies. In the first quarter of this year, Amazon grew by, in 2023, Amazon grew by 27%. Google by 20 something. I mean, the big money is not being made by the holding companies, being made by Google.
Yeah, because on the other side, you have the in-housing. So, of course, the platforms are making the money anyway, right? Because you have the middleman. The middleman is the agency. The thing is that on the other side, because you're talking about the big groups, right? But on the other side, you have boutique agencies, which in my opinion will win in the long run, because a boutique agency is able to make you pay a little bit more, maybe as less scale. So, of course, it doesn't have the large scale that maybe the big groups have. But at the end of the day, today, honestly, if you have a proper boutique agency and they can do the right translations and everything, and you're buying online, you don't need to be in every main city of Europe and the States as well. On the other side, you have in-housing. You can take this talent, take it in-house, and actually have also talent retention, because a lot of people talk about big group agencies and whatever, but the turnover is huge. They don't keep the historical learning and knowledge, so you're losing everything. They're telling you, this is the your client lead, but then the team below them, they changing and they working on every 4 or 5 clients. So at the end of the day, who is gonna retain the knowledge, the best practice? Only the on the client side, right? So in my opinion, the solution is either in-housing or boutique agencies then, because big groups, if they continue like that, they can just work with huge clients. They can afford to lose money as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the big money, the big budgets, multinational brand budgets are going through the big agency groups still, because they can do it in every market from the US to New Zealand. They can achieve a degree of consistency, so you get scalability. I mean, again, let's not pretend that you get a consistency of everything in that scenario, because you don't. But at least there's the appearance of it. And one of the odd things is, you're right about in-housing, except that clients don't seem to want to do it to the extent that you might think they would, for all the reasons you stated, including control over the data, understanding, the real sort of insights that you get from being, within, and so on. They really don't like to take on extra cost internally. They'd rather outsource it to agencies often, because there's something about, we don't want to take on more cost. Or because cost is something that's permanent. From an accounting point of view, it's not so great as having an external agency where in theory, you can cut them off at any time, and you can also change them if they're not working. The client, there was a lot of talk about in-housing 5 years ago or more. It didn't really happen to the same extent that we thought. Media, I don't think, ever should have been in-housed in the way that it was described. Maybe studios. For creative, etc.
Don't you think it's a political choice as well? Because if you think about it, you are the CMO of a company. If you in-house, of course, you have a huge cost, but you're taking a huge risk. So if things goes wrong, it's on you. Where if you are in the agency, if you hire Nick, and Nick is not working well for many reasons, right? And then it's Nick's fault. Let's go to Joe.
Well, the other issue is to do with organization and operations, because in this day and age, it's not just about the CMO, and it's not like it used to be, where you had one vertical doing all of this. In today's marketing environment, you've got the marketing, brand, ops, product, IT or technology, distribution, CRM. You need to reorganize your organization around the needs of a lot of individuals, which creates a lot of problems in terms of getting everybody to operate in the same way together, particularly in the areas of retail media and digital commerce, where you've seen all of those things, if you like, packaged up. And we've now got clients who are completely reorganizing themselves in order to be fit for purpose in that environment, which means often having somebody at the top of all of it, in charge of all aspects of it, including product, including pricing, distribution, CRM, and those kind of things. It's incredibly complicated and very difficult to pull off. You also have to make a decision about how much is insourced, how much is outsourced. And then, as you say, you've got the risk profile of all of that. And sometimes it's just easier to kind of go, you know what, it's too hard. We're going to give it to somebody else to fix. Because at least then you can kick them if it goes wrong, or you can fire them if it goes wrong. And quite often it does go wrong. And at least then it's kind of like, somebody else's problem, somebody else's fault.
What's your advice to new agencies then? If you were going to start again, right? If you had to start an agency today, what would you do? How would you do it?
I would absolutely have both content and channels as a capability. People talk about creative and media coming back together again. I tend to think of it as content and channels, because content can be anything from a lineage ad in search all the way through to a 60-second cinema commercial, or a 6-second video on YouTube or whatever. And I would use technology to be able to execute that content across multiple platforms, and I would use technology to be able to distribute that content on different platforms as well. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a full service agency. That's very, very old language. I would call it, I would describe it differently. I would say we are a content and activation agency, and you need to offer something different to the marketplace because that's available in packages elsewhere. And I think what we're going to see is we're going to see the emergence, and we're starting to see that already, of a new kind of agency that can actually do all those things. But you've got to be able to do it across a wide range of channels. It's no longer enough to sort of say, well, we do media, but we can't do CRM, we can't do email, we can't do, you've got to be able to do all of that, which is very hard. But the ultimately, if you want to be different in this marketplace, you have to offer that, because if you're planning anything, you need to be very broad in your view. And if the answer is yes, we want a 60-second TV commercial, cinema commercial, for example, but we also need lineage ads in search. We also need a 6-second YouTube video, and we need also a brilliant email marketing idea. Then in a perfect world, that you would be able to span all of that and deliver the content and deliver the channel activation as well. Now, what I've described is a perfect world. We don't live in one of those, but that's kind of what I would do if I were to start again now. And thank God I don't have to.
I mean, you achieved a lot. You started one of the probably best agencies in the world. You moved on. You have done so many things. Sounds like a lot of hard work. How did you find your work-life balance?
What work-life balance? I'm not sure I recognise that phrase yet. The answer to all of this is really quite a cliche. It's quite a hackneyed answer. Is that you're only as good as the people around you. So when we started our agency, we chose our partners very carefully. We partnered up with a creative agency who had a stake in us. We partnered up with a media agency group who had a stake in us. Myself and my co-founder, Colin Gottlieb, had two extraordinarily good people who came with us from our previous agency. So we had our executive team, if you like, of 4 people, very good people. We had our media agency partner who gave us access to certain assets and resources that we needed. And we had a great creative partner who helped introduce us to clients. We went in together. We talked together. They had a fantastic account planning facility that was very useful to us. So throughout my entire career, it's always been about relationships and partnerships with people. And sometimes that's big groups of people. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just a small group of people. But, the old expression about sort of we can go quickly alone, but in the right direction together is true. It takes longer. It's more difficult, but it's definitely the right answer. And, if I was starting again, I would do exactly the same thing. I would find the right people to surround myself with. And I certainly wouldn't dream of trying to do anything on my own because it's too hard.
So then, last question I usually ask to everyone joining my video podcast is, what's your definition of success? How do you define success? Because some people define success as, making a lot of money. Some other people define success as, leaving everything, getting a boat and, enjoying the sun. What's your definition of success?
If you're talking about personal success?
Success.
Success. Well, it's a very good question because I am one of those kind of people who've never really measured success in financial terms. It just doesn't, I can't quite understand why people do, but I know that they do. And sometimes it's a way of keeping score. Sometimes it's a way of demonstrating to the world that you've done well. But it just doesn't sit well with me as an outcome. I'd rather be surrounded by smart people. I'd rather be, family is obviously very, very important. Having other interests is very important, and I have many of those. For example, I now write history books and run a history society. I spend a lot of time going to the cinema, traveling abroad, theatre, books, etc., all the stuff that you kind of do. And also you can do when you're no longer working full time. So success for me is largely about people in the end. I mean, it's not that I've ever been by any definition what you might describe as a people person. I'm not particularly good at that. I'm too shy and I don't really enjoy some of it. but I do like being with people and creating relationships, working with people in that way, and doing good things. And I'm gonna give a big plug now to the movement we're starting now called Who Cares. I think this is starting to become interesting now, because what we've decided, myself and a gentleman called Brian Jacobs, is that there's lots of things about advertising which are brilliant and some things that aren't. And we're teaming up with a lot of very, very clever people to figure out what we do about the things that aren't. And what's been great about that is that ever since we announced this 3 weeks ago, we've had 145 people from around the world volunteer coming to us. We haven't invited anybody. Everybody's come to us voluntarily and said, we want to help you to make advertising great again and to address a lot of these issues that we have as an industry. And that's brilliant, because we've got a lot of very, very smart, very motivated people who care. And everybody's doing this voluntarily. We're not earning any money. We're not doing this for any commercial benefit at all. We no longer have careers to build in terms of Brian and myself. There's nothing in it for us other than the fact that we care. And we'd like to see a better industry, not just for people who are in it now, but certainly for the people who should join it. And I think one of the problems we know that we've got is recruiting people is harder now. We know that salaries have stagnated. We know that benefits have stagnated. The work's got harder, etc., etc. If you talk to people who are out there now and said, would you like to work in advertising? Fewer people than that used to be the case would say so. It hasn't got the reputation it used to have. It hasn't got the kudos it used to have. And people kind of go, well, what is the advertising industry these days? Because they see all these ads going out. And a lot of them go, that's not something I want to be associated with. Yeah. So we've got an issue here.
Yeah, I think it gets back to the agency model as well, you know what I mean? The perception of how important is communication and marketing. In my opinion, and it's not just because I work in this industry, communication and marketing is key. And this is probably one of the main reasons why I moved to England, right? Because I feel like in this country, communication and marketing is pretty cool. Like you can tell, like the way you guys communicate in the subway, the advertising and everything. So I love it, and I feel like creativity is the key in a world where, you know, AI is becoming more important, the world is becoming more efficient. We need personality, we need creativity, and I think it will win at the end. We just need to stick together and make sure that, you know, the message has been spread. You know what I mean?
Well, that's really what the Who Cares movement is all about. And Brian and I are kind of, you know, we're getting on a bit and no longer young people, but we care a lot about the advertising industry as it is today. It's not that we don't want to turn back the clock. We don't want to go back to the Mad Men days. Equally, we don't want it to be dominated by math men and the ad tech industry the way that it currently is. And I worry a lot about that. And it's really interesting, actually, that we think we're tapping into a bit of a seam here, because we know that there are people in the US who are thinking very similar things to us. We had a session yesterday with them, and they're talking very similar language to us. We've had an enormous response from all around the world when we started talking about Who Cares. We've had lots of incoming from Asia Pacific in particular. Less so from other parts of Europe, interestingly, you know, but the support that we've had has been absolutely unbelievable. We've been overwhelmed by it. And so our event on September the 12th, which we're going to hold in London, is where we are not going to spend any time at all talking about the problems that the industry have. We think everybody knows what they are. We're going to talk about ideas, and we're going to talk about solutions. And we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what people are going to say. But we're not going to sit there and kind of moan about how bad things are compared to the old days or anything like that. It's about how do we rectify a lot of things that we feel have gone wrong? How do we rebalance the industry away from where it has been? And we're not just talking about traditional advertising. We're talking about retail media. We're talking about digital commerce. We're talking about influencers. It's platform neutral. It's about how do we do the job better? How do we tell those stories? How do we put people first, right? Because I think the main putting people first is the obvious thing to do, because if you don't do that, then you're not going to succeed. Understanding the motivations for people, how do you reach people? and and how do you put quality back in? We can't have an industry where it's kind of, oh, we've got to make a 2-second ad on TikTok, or we've got to worry about the first 2 seconds of our ad on TikTok because that's all the attention that we're going to get. If we allow ourselves to get dragged down that road, then we will harm our own industry, harm ourselves, and harm the people who are coming behind us.
Nick, thank you so much for your time. That was a pleasure. That was an honor, actually, meeting you today. Yeah, I will say cheers to people, and I will say people first, man. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks very much. Yeah, that's been fantastic.